Good afternoon and welcome to this episode of Congressional Conversations, where we discuss the priorities facing the New York Jewish community with our congressional elected officials. I have the honor to host you as Executive Vice President and CEO of JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York. My name is Gideon Taylor. And today we are particularly glad to be joined by a longtime friend of JCRC, a friend of many of the staff of JCRC, of the lay leadership of JCRC, Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. She serves as chairwoman of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. In Congress, she represents the 12th District, which covers the east side of Manhattan and Roosevelt Island, extends across the East River into Queens. So welcome, Congresswoman. We're really very pleased to have you with us and to continue the conversations that you've had with JCRC at so many different venues and ways since many, many years back, too long to count. But I think the issue that's on everyone's mind that we want to talk about is the war in Ukraine. And it's obviously such deep concern to us as a Jewish community, as us as New Yorkers, as citizens of the world. And there are obviously many Ukrainians in New York, both Jewish, others of different faiths. So it's something that we all obviously in New York feel very deeply. And we sort of just wanted to start with getting your perspective on how you see this going and what steps you think can be taken by the administration and by the United States.
Well, I stand completely with the nation and people of Ukraine. In fact, I represent a very large and vibrant Ukrainian community on the Lower East Side. There have been many prayer vigils, many meetings, many concerns. We get together for St. Patrick's Day to celebrate that. But this year we were honoring Ukraine, and all our prayers and hopes are with them. Last week we had voted $14 billion, as in billions of dollars for Ukraine. And we are doing everything we can to help them with knowledge, with advice, with weapons, with all kinds of help. But the president is very clear that we are not going into war, which would probably be a third world war. But we have put forward crippling sanctions. When it started, some countries were refusing to join us, such as Germany, but now they are vowing that they will spend more of their budget on maintaining security for their own country in the region, and have been donating monies and supplies to Ukraine. I would say our Asian and our European Union allies, all of them, even Sweden, that used to claimed they were independent and they were really a peaceful nation, they would never get involved. They're involved. Switzerland has joined the coalition, which was surprising to me. They usually try to say that they're above it all and they're not part of these fights. But I think Europe is very concerned about an aggressive Putin moving forward. I think he's got to be surprised at how quickly the world unified against him and have consented and are aggressively becoming part of an effort to sanction Russia. Particularly with the financial institutions that we have. They are denied the use of the swift transferring of proceeds internationally for banking, which would cripple their international banking. And we have really cut down on absolutely everything. I have a bill that opened up the LLCs to show us what and who is behind these LLCs. Often we don't know who's buying a business or buying a piece of real estate in New York. Just last week, the bill passed a year ago and it was 2 years to implement it. They said they couldn't implement it in Treasury. I was able to work with my colleagues to secure roughly $300 million to help them set up the system so we can understand who are these LLCs with the Treasury Department who's in charge of it. A lot of them are oligarchs that are hiding their money here. Everybody is determined. We also voted last week to cut off oil, to stop buying oil from Russia. We were buying roughly 300 barrels a day. and it's going to cause the cost of gas to go up in our own country. But it was a move that Congress actually initiated and President Biden implemented. I think it also will be a chance for us to move to more green energy, getting off of fossil fuels so that we won't have to import more oil, becoming more independent energy-wise for our own country. As the chair of the Oversight Committee, we have jurisdiction over procurement. And I filed a bill this week that none of the over $465 billion that the US government contracts with the world, with private contractors across the world, that not $1 shall go to any business that is doing business with Russia. So we've moved swiftly and effectively to put very tough sanctions into place. I pray that they will have a peace settlement. The pain and suffering that is taking place in Ukraine, particularly with the mothers and the children and the families, the Ukrainian people, their institutions, their buildings. We saw recently that Russia went into Poland and bombed a site where they claimed people were gathering in order to fight against Russia. They said they would attack any site that is trying to attack Russia. So I'm concerned about an escalation of the battle into other states. I just hope that President Biden and his team can negotiate a peace. But we are going to be talking to President Zelensky tomorrow. He is going to address a joint session of Congress. He, of course, is the only person who can reach a settlement, who can negotiate for his people. But I hope that he will be able to achieve one with his supporters' support with Russia, with President Putin. I think it's in the interest of the world to have a swift settlement for this terrible invasion, brutal invasion.
Brutal. So the JCRC, working together with UJ Federation and other groups, we've been reaching out to our other Ukrainians in New York, and there's a number of, as you know, efforts, relief efforts, efforts to send help to Ukraine. What can you advise people in the district in New York? What is it that people can do to help?
Well, I have talked to the Ukrainian Congress, and that is an organization that pulls the community together. We've had several meetings. What they're asking for is really money. And I can put up 2 sites on my website, it's not up now, of where you can give to Ukraine. It's very hard to get the supplies there. The churches tell me that their basements are full of supplies, food, things that people have brought to ship over, but they're fighting for their lives. And when you ship goods over, we have to figure out how to get them there. A lot of planes are not flying now. You have to ship it, and then how do you distribute it? So it's a really supply chain problem of how getting it. One mother said, I have all these baby clothes. Well, then how do you get it to the woman who has the baby in Ukraine? It's a connection problem. So the easiest way is to send money. They have 2 sites. One is for military aid, and one is for humanitarian aid. And that is what the government of Ukraine is asking for. And that is what the people in Ukraine is asking for. To share a story, I was thinking about doing a fundraiser for Ukraine. And then I thought, this is so crazy. We just voted $14 billion. What I could most do to be helpful is get that money signed and delivered and sent to Ukraine. I don't think I could be able to raise all that much money to make a big dent. But you could really just supporting what the president has spearheaded and the Congress has supported of getting the 14 billion out of America and into Ukraine, actually helping them with their day-to-day lives.
Thank you. So maybe turning to a different issue, but maybe not so different, the work you've done, your legislation, the Never Again Education Act of May of 2020, which supported Holocaust education. It passed unanimously in the House. So it's been 2 years now since the passage of the Act. So can you tell us a little more about how you see this whole field of Holocaust education? It's one that I professionally was very engaged in through my work previously with the Claims Conference. So I'm certainly very familiar with it, and the importance of that legislation, clearly seminal for Holocaust survivors, for their families, and for the wider community. Interested to hear what your perspectives are now, looking back 2 years later, and how you see this going forward and the implications for us of Holocaust education.
Well, it's an ongoing challenge. And just last week, I managed a resolution on the floor, 881, to condemn the terrorist attack against the congregation, Beth Israel in Colleyville, Texas. And that condemned that horrifying incident at the congregation and encourages future legislation to address hate and secure our communities against faith-based violence. So I think, first and foremost, whenever there is an attack of anti-Semitism, I think we as a nation have to speak out, whether it's a resolution in Congress or a candlelight vigil in our communities. We have to speak out. My office in Queens has been attacked with anti-Semitic drawings, and a friend of mine who lives in Manhattan, who's an elected official, her office has been attacked several times. And this is very upsetting to me. Usually I thought about it as something way away in Europe or in Texas, but not in New York, not in the great city of New York, but there are a lot of incidents here. I'm a former teacher, so I see the answer to many questions as education. Educating the public. Of course, it is a long-term goal, education. It's not something you can snap your fingers and make happen. But I feel that education is a central part of teaching acceptance, tolerance, love. People are not born with hate in their hearts. They are taught it. So we have to counter that hate with the message of understanding and mutual support and caring for our other citizens. So really, I put the bill in several years ago, but after we had some very bad incidents in New York, and we had really big marches and vigils, and it was really very focused. I remember going to a JCRC meeting and talking about my bill, the Never Again Holocaust Education Act, which would take the work that really roughly 12 states have passed Holocaust education, including the state of New York. And I've looked at their teaching materials, and they're very excellent. But to take it and make it a national program so that all of this work that teachers are doing across the nation and educational institutions can be brought into one place and build on what has already been done and help teachers and people who want to educate other people across the country. So it will be a centralized, we've tried first to do it at the Board of Education, but it got too complicated and quite frankly, too political. They wanted to add dress it up like a Christmas tree with every injustice that had ever happened anywhere, which was not the intent of my legislation. So I went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington and asked them to sponsor it. And when you go to the museum in Washington or interact with their leadership, be sure to thank them for taking this program. They already had an excellent program. And so this builds on top of it, the research and work that they have done with funding, roughly 5 to 10 million over 5 years for creative educational ideas, to support students, to support research, to support people who may want to come, teachers to Washington to see the Holocaust Museum. It's to support the efforts of training people and educating people on the Holocaust. And during the time that we worked on this legislation, there was a very important poll done. I believe it was done by B'nai B'rith, but it showed that people did not even know what the Holocaust was, which is astonishing to me. They did not even know what Auschwitz was. They just didn't know. And very, very importantly, they thought that Hitler had come to power through a coup. It's really more frightening to see that he was literally elected. Such an evil person in a democracy can be elected. And it shows to me how fragile our democracy is and how we have to be very careful who we elect with positions that affect policies and national security in our government. So we got behind it, but it was really at a JCRC breakfast where I talked about it. And the head of Hadassah was there, Janice Shorenstein, and she came in and she said, look, I really don't get involved in anything but Hadassah, but she adopted it as a project for Hadassah. And as you know, Hadassah is everywhere. It's all across the country. It's international, really. So through her network, we started lobbying all of the people across the country. And to make a long story short, in 2020, it passed the House and the Senate almost like it was the biggest bipartisan bill that passed in that legislative session with Republicans and Democrats coming together. It had a presidential bill signing with the former president, which is usually held up as only for very transformational landmark legislation, and it involved religious leaders across the country. And so I'm very proud that the bill has been passed and put into effect, and it is there helping people, and we need to continue supporting it and working to make it even better. There are 19 states that require Holocaust education as part of their secondary school curriculum. But my Never Again Education Act helped to address this lack that other states have by giving funding to the Holocaust Museum to create lesson plans, resources, and programs that are now very accessible on their website for educators and the wider public. So I'm very proud of having authored that bill. And I think we need to work in every way we possibly can, as JCRC does, to unite communities, to unite faiths, to unite the country, working for a stronger support system for everyone.
Right.
They're telling me that my time is up. I have to be on a train to Washington in order to go and vote for you. So I have other things that I wanted to talk about, but I think my time is up, and I have to make sure, if I miss this train, I'm really in trouble, because then I miss voting. And then you'll have all your membership calling me, Carolyn, why weren't you voting?
You're there to vote. Well, we will continue the conversation. Thank you for your leadership on these issues, on Israel, and so anti-Semitism, on hate, on so many issues. So we look forward to continuing this conversation. We appreciate all this partnership, and we will be talking more. So thank you very much for joining us today.
And congratulations on your new appointment. I look forward to working with you and JCRC.